The billionaire saw his ex in an elevator, but it's the little girl calling him daddy that changes everything. You're my daddy. Mommy showed me pictures before she went to sleep forever. She said you were tall and had sad eyes and worked in a building that touched the clouds. This building touches clouds. I checked when we came in. The 5-year-old's voice echoed in the elevator like a bomb detonating in slow motion. Teresa George felt her entire world tilt sideways as she watched little Iris reach up to take the hand of Martin Raymond, Billionaire CEO, the man responsible for her sister's death. The man Teresa had spent 3 years teaching herself to hate with clinical precision. Martin's face drained of all color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes, those sad gray eyes Vanessa had described in tear-stained journals, moved from the child to Teresa and back again, searching for an explanation that made sense. Teresa, what is she talking about? Who is this child? Teresa's hand shot out to grab Iris, pulling her back with enough force that the little girl stumbled slightly. Her voice came out ice cold, each word a carefully aimed blade. We have a meeting with Hartwell Industries in 3 minutes. Everything else can wait. Like hell it can. That child just called me her father. And whose fault is that? Teresa's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Whose fault is it that my sister filled her daughter's head with stories about a man who promised her forever and delivered nothing but abandonment? Whose fault is it that Vanessa died believing you might still come back? The elevator doors began to close. Martin's hand shot out to stop them, his jaw tight with barely controlled emotion. Don't you dare walk away from this conversation. Watch me. But before Teresa could move, Iris looked up at both of them with those dark, knowing eyes that were too old for a 5-year-old and asked the question that changed everything. Are you mad at Aunt Teresa? Because she's really smart. She can explain anything if you ask nicely. The innocence in that voice, the complete lack of awareness about the emotional grenade she'd just thrown into the confined space, made both adults freeze. Martin crouched down to Iris's level, his voice softening in a way Teresa hadn't heard in the brief moments of their reunion. I'm not mad, sweetheart. Just confused about some things. What's your name? Iris. Iris Vanessa George. I'm 5 3/4. Do you want to see my rabbit? His name is Cloudhopper. Teresa wanted to scream. She wanted to grab Iris and run. She wanted to slap Martin Raymond across his perfectly symmetrical face and tell him he had no right to speak to her niece, no right to crouch down like a caring father when he'd abandoned Vanessa while she was pregnant and desperate. Instead, she pressed the button for the 47th floor and said in a voice that could freeze fire, "We're going to be late. And then, we're going to talk." In that order. But that conversation in the elevator, that moment when past and present collided with the force of a train wreck, that wasn't where this story began. To understand how Teresa George ended up in an elevator with her dead sister's daughter and the man who destroyed that sister's life, you need to go back to the moment 3 hours earlier when Teresa was sitting in her Denver office, preparing for the biggest pitch of her career. George Tech Solutions had been Teresa's entire world for 3.5 years. She'd built it from nothing, from grief and rage and the desperate need to prove that Vanessa's brilliance hadn't died with her. Every line of code, every client contract, every late night, when Iris finally fell asleep and Teresa could work until her eyes burned, it was all in service of one goal: make Vanessa's innovations matter, make her sister's death mean something. And today was the culmination of 18 months of careful planning. Hartwell Industries, one of the biggest tech infrastructure companies in North America, was choosing between 2 vendors for their AI integration protocol: George Tech versus Raymond Industries, Teresa versus Martin Raymond. She'd known this confrontation was coming eventually. The tech world was small at the highest levels, and Martin's company had been her primary competitor for the past year. But she'd always managed to avoid him personally, conducting business through intermediaries, keeping her hatred professional and distant. Until Elena, her assistant and closest friend, walked into her office that morning, with Iris holding her hand and guilt written all over her face. "Teresa, I'm so sorry. My sister just called. Mom's in the hospital. I have to get to Portland right now. I can't watch Iris today." Teresa looked up from her presentation notes to see Iris standing there in her purple dress, the one she'd insisted on wearing despite Teresa's suggestion of something more practical, clutching Cloudhopper the rabbit like a talisman against the adult chaos swirling around her. "The presentation is in 4 hours. I can't reschedule. I know. I'm so sorry. I tried calling every backup on our list, but it's last minute and everyone's booked." Elena's voice cracked slightly. "I have to go. My mom had a stroke." "Of course you do. Go. Family comes first." Teresa stood up, her mind already running through impossible logistics. She crossed to Iris and crouched down. Looks like you're coming with Aunt Teresa to a very important meeting today. Can you be my special helper? Iris nodded solemnly. I can be very quiet, like a mouse. Squeak, squeak. Despite everything, Teresa smiled. That's my girl. Now, let's get you some snacks for the plane ride. The private jet, that had been another carefully calculated decision. Teresa had spent almost every dollar of liquid capital George Tech possessed to lease it for the day, because showing up to pitch Hartwell Industries in a commercial airline wasn't going to cut it. You had to look like you belonged in their stratosphere to be taken seriously. Plus, it gave Iris somewhere to nap during the 3-hour flight from Denver to New York. Teresa spent those 3 hours rehearsing her pitch, refining her slides, and absolutely not thinking about the possibility of running into Martin Raymond. The odds were slim. He ran a company with over 800 employees. He didn't attend every pitch meeting personally, except apparently he did. The elevator lurched upward from the underground parking garage of the Meridian Business Complex. Teresa checked her reflection one final time in the polished steel doors. Charcoal pantsuit, crisp white blouse, her auburn hair twisted into a knot that said professional, not approachable. She looked like someone who'd built a $40 million company in less than 4 years. She looked like someone who didn't need anyone's approval or sympathy. She looked nothing like the broken woman who'd held her sister's hand while Vanessa died from complications that could have been prevented if she'd sought medical care earlier, if she hadn't been too proud and too heartbroken to ask for help. Mama, why are we here? Iris asked for the 3rd time since they'd left Denver. I told you, sweetie. We're meeting some very important people for Aunt Teresa's company. You're going to color very quietly in your special book while the grown-ups talk about boring business things. Okay? Okay. But Iris was looking at the elevator numbers climbing. 32nd floor. 33rd. Do you think we'll see clouds from up here? Maybe. We'll see. The elevator slowed at the 45th floor. Teresa wasn't expecting it to stop. Her meeting was on 47. But the doors opened anyway, and standing there, looking exactly like the photographs Vanessa had cried over, was Martin Raymond. Time did what it always does in moments of crisis. It fractured into 1,000 sharp pieces. Teresa saw everything at once. Martin at 39, more distinguished than he'd been in those stolen photographs Vanessa had shown her 4 years ago, with trembling hands and fever-bright hope in her voice. His dark suit probably cost more than Teresa's first car. His eyes were the same gray as winter ocean, and they widened in recognition that came 1 second too slow, like his mind was sorting through files to place her face. Teresa. His voice carried that same deep timbre Vanessa had described in late-night phone calls, back when she'd been so certain he would leave his arranged marriage, his business obligations, his entire constructed life for her. He never had. Mr. Raymond. Teresa's voice was glacial as she stepped forward slightly, forcing him to either move back into the elevator or be walked through. He moved, stepping inside. We have a meeting with Hartwell at 10. I assume you're headed to the same place. Yes. He was staring at her like she was a ghost, and perhaps she was. Perhaps he saw Vanessa in the shape of her face, the color of her hair, the way she held her shoulders. Everyone said the sisters had looked alike. Close enough that strangers asked if they were twins, though Vanessa had been 3 years younger and infinitely more fragile. Her beauty had been the delicate kind that made men want to protect her. Teresa's beauty, if she possessed any, was the sharp kind that warned men to keep their distance. And then Iris, sweet, innocent Iris, who'd spent 5 years looking at the few photographs Vanessa had managed to keep, spoke the words that detonated everything. Daddy. Teresa's head snapped toward her niece. No, this wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But Iris had already released Teresa's hand, was already moving toward Martin with the unhesitating trust of a child who'd been shown photographs and told stories and built an entire mythology around an absent parent. You're my daddy. Mommy showed me pictures before she went to sleep forever. She said you were tall and had sad eyes and worked in a building that touched the clouds. This building touches clouds. I checked when we came in. Martin looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His face went from pale to gray. His briefcase actually slipped from his hand, hitting the elevator floor with a thud that made Iris jump slightly. I don't, he stammered. Teresa. What is she talking about? Who is this child? The elevator doors began to close. Teresa jabbed the hold button with enough force to hurt her finger. Her mind was racing through options at light speed. She could correct Iris right here, explain that this wasn't her father, protect Martin from this uncomfortable moment and herself from the vulnerability of revealing that she'd been raising Vanessa's daughter for 3 years, since the day she'd gotten the call that her sister had died from complications. That could have been prevented if she'd had money for better doctors, if she'd had someone to drive her to the hospital when the bleeding started, if she hadn't been too proud or too heartbroken to call the man who'd gotten her pregnant. Or she could let this play out. Let Martin Raymond squirm. Let him feel one fraction of the discomfort Vanessa had felt in those final months, alone and pregnant and increasingly ill, still believing he would call, he would come back, he would choose her. Teresa made her choice in the space of a heartbeat. This is Iris, my niece, my sister Vanessa's daughter. She watched the name land like a grenade. Martin actually reached out to brace himself against the elevator wall, his hand shaking visibly. Vanessa. He repeated the name like a prayer or a curse. Vanessa George, the woman you promised to build a life with before you decided your merger marriage to Catherine Hartwell was more profitable than actual happiness. Teresa's voice was clinical, precise, each word a scalpel cutting through pretense. The woman who died 3 years ago from complications related to a pregnancy she hid from you because you'd already made it clear she wasn't worth the inconvenience. The silence that followed was suffocating. Iris, oblivious to the adult tension crackling like electricity around her, was still focused on Martin with pure, uncomplicated hope. Do you want to see my rabbit? His name is Cloudhopper. He's very soft. Mommy. She gave him to me before she went to the hospital. Aunt Teresa says, Mommy is sleeping forever in heaven, but sometimes I think she's just very, very sleepy. Martin's hand came up to cover his mouth. His eyes were shining with what might have been tears, though Teresa refused to feel sympathy. Tears were easy. Tears cost nothing. How old is she? Martin's voice was hoarse. 5. Her birthday is March 16th. Teresa watched him do the math, watched the realization hit. Watched him count backward 9 months from March and land on June 4 years ago, right when he'd ended things with Vanessa to fully commit to his marriage with Catherine Hartwell. They're mine. It wasn't a question. Biologically, yes. In every other way that matters, no. She's mine. I was there when she was born. I was there when Vanessa died 6 hours later from hemorrhaging the doctors couldn't stop. I've been there for every nightmare, every milestone, every moment of her life. You contributed genetic material. I contributed everything else. Martin looked like he wanted to argue, but the elevator lurched slightly, reminding them it was still moving. The 47th floor was approaching. We can't do this now. Teresa's voice shifted back to professional ice. We have a presentation in 2 minutes. Iris, come here, baby. But are we going to talk about this? Martin's hand shot out to hold the elevator door again as it opened on 47. You can't just drop this bomb and walk away. Watch me. But even as Teresa said it, she knew it was impossible. Because waiting in the glass and chrome conference room just down the hallway were 3 Hartwell Industries executives, including Robert Hartwell himself, his daughter Catherine, and their chief technology officer Diane Chen. Catherine, Martin's wife, the woman Vanessa had lost him to. And Teresa was about to walk into that room with Iris, who Martin now knew was his daughter, and somehow deliver the pitch of her life while this bomb ticked quietly in the corner. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity. She wanted to cry at the cruelty of fate. Instead, she took Iris's hand and walked toward the conference room like she was walking into battle. Because she was. If you've ever had to face the person who destroyed someone you love while pretending everything is fine, while protecting a child from adult chaos, while fighting for your professional life all at the same time, you know that feeling of wanting to scream or run or burn the whole building down. If you're feeling the tension right now, if you need to know what happens when Teresa walks into that conference room with Martin's secret daughter, hit that like button. Share this with someone who believes in messy, complicated justice. And subscribe to Mr. Kingsley Luck's stories, because what happens next will test everything you think you know about revenge, redemption, and what we owe the people we've lost. Now let's see how Teresa handles the most important meeting of her life, with her dead sister's lover sitting right there. The Hartwell Industries conference room was all glass and chrome, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Manhattan that made even Teresa's considerable success feel small. 3 executives sat on one side of a massive table. Robert Hartwell, silver-haired and calculating, had the kind of face that had closed billion-dollar deals with a handshake. His daughter Catherine sat beside him, blonde and beautiful in a cream-colored suit, wearing a wedding ring that caught the light. And Diane Chen, their chief technology officer, had a reputation for cutting through corporate nonsense that Teresa deeply respected. Teresa had counted on that reputation. Her presentation was designed to appeal to someone who valued innovation over charm, substance over flash. What she hadn't counted on was Catherine Hartwell being Martin Raymond's wife. The realization hit like ice water as Martin entered behind her and Catherine stood with a warm smile, crossing to kiss his cheek with the casual intimacy of long-established partnership. "Darling, you didn't tell me you were attending this meeting. Last-minute decision." Martin's voice was carefully controlled, but Teresa could hear the strain underneath. "I wanted to see George Tech's presentation myself. I've been hearing interesting things about their AI integration protocols, lies built on lies." Teresa could see it in the tension of his shoulders, hear it in the forced casualness of his tone. He hadn't known about this meeting until he'd stepped into that elevator. He was here now because Iris had called him Daddy, and he needed answers more than he needed whatever he'd planned to do this morning. "Miss George." Robert Hartwell extended his hand across the table, his grip firm and assessing. "We've been looking forward to this presentation. Your reputation precedes you. Built George Tech from the ground up in just 4 years. Is that correct?" 3.5 years. Teresa settled Iris into a chair in the corner with her coloring book and a look that the little girl understood perfectly. Then she moved to the presentation screen, connected her laptop, and forced every thought of Martin Raymond out of her mind. "I started George Tech 6 months after my sister passed away. She was a brilliant software developer who never got the chance to see her innovations implemented because this industry can be brutally unkind to women, particularly women who don't have Ivy League credentials or family connections. Everything I've built has been in service of proving that talent matters more than pedigree." She clicked to the first slide, a graph showing George Tech's growth trajectory compared to industry standards. The numbers spoke for themselves. Aggressive expansion, consistent revenue increase, client retention rates that outpaced companies 3 times their size. "Your AI integration protocol is impressive." Diane Shen leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp with intelligence. "But Raymond Industries has a similar product launching next quarter. What makes George Tech's version worth choosing over an established competitor?" It was the question Teresa had been waiting for. The question she'd spent 6 weeks preparing to demolish. "Martin, may I?" She used his first name deliberately, intimately, watching his eyes narrow slightly in response. She didn't wait for permission. She switched to a side-by-side comparison she'd spent those 6 weeks developing. George Tech's AI protocol versus Raymond Industries' planned release. The differences were subtle but significant. Her version was faster, more adaptive, required 60% less infrastructure investment. Raymond Industries builds excellent technology for corporations that have unlimited budgets and endless patience. Teresa's voice was smooth, professional, deadly. George Tech builds excellent technology for everyone else. We're leaner, faster, and significantly more cost-effective because we have to be. We don't have the luxury of inefficiency. It was a direct challenge and everyone in the room knew it. Martin's expression remained neutral, but Teresa had spent enough time studying photographs of him through Vanessa's eyes to read the micro-expressions. The slight tightening around his mouth meant he was impressed despite himself. The way his fingers drummed once against his thigh before forcing stillness meant he wanted to argue, but knew she was right. Cost-effective often means cutting corners. Martin's voice was measured. Hartwell Industries can't afford to compromise on security or reliability. I agree completely. Teresa pulled up her next slide without missing a beat, which is why George Tech's protocol has been tested against 17 different breach scenarios and maintained perfect integrity in all of them. I'm happy to provide our complete security audits, all conducted by third-party firms with full transparency. Can Raymond Industries say the same? The question hung in the air like a sword. They both knew the answer. Raymond Industries' upcoming launch had been rushed to market to beat competitors, and rumors of incomplete testing had already circulated in industry circles. Catherine was watching this exchange with visible fascination, her eyes moving between Teresa and her husband like she was watching a tennis match. And in the corner, Iris colored quietly, occasionally glancing up to watch the adults with her dark, knowing eyes. Teresa spent the next 45 minutes delivering the presentation of her life. Part 2, 2,500 words. She answered every technical question with precision. She addressed every concern about her company's size with evidence of their agility and innovation. She made it absolutely clear that choosing George Tech wasn't a risk. It was the smart play for a company that wanted to lead rather than follow. Through it all, Martin watched her with an intensity that felt like it could ignite the air between them. When she finished, Robert Hartwell exchanged glances with his daughter and Diane Chen. A silent conversation happened in the language of longtime business partners. "We'll need a few days to review both proposals." Robert's voice was measured, but Teresa caught the slight nod he gave Diane. "But I'll be honest, Miss George, you've made a compelling case. We'll be in touch by end of week." It wasn't a commitment, but it wasn't a dismissal either. Teresa had done everything she could. The rest was out of her hands. As the meeting concluded and people began gathering materials, Catherine approached Teresa with a smile that was polished and professional. "I love that you brought your daughter. So few women in tech feel comfortable being mothers and professionals simultaneously. It's refreshing to see." Teresa felt her jaw tighten. "She's my niece, actually. I'm her legal guardian." "Oh, I'm so sorry." Catherine's sympathy seemed genuine. "I didn't mean to presume." "Is her mother?" She lowered her voice slightly. "Is she still with us?" "Deceased. 3 years ago." "That must be incredibly difficult." Catherine glanced at Martin, who was speaking with Robert but clearly listening to their conversation. "Martin and I have been trying for children for years. It's our one great sadness. I can't imagine losing a sister who was a mother." The irony was so thick Teresa nearly choked on it. This woman had no idea that her husband had fathered Iris, that the child she was looking at with wistful sadness was genetically half Raymond, that her perfect marriage was built on secrets that were about to detonate. "Iris is a gift." Teresa kept her voice carefully neutral. "Every day with her is both the hardest and most rewarding thing I've ever done. Clearly you're managing beautifully, running a company and raising a child alone." Catherine shook her head admiringly. "I don't know how you do it. You do what you have to do when there's no alternative." Martin had moved closer during this exchange, his presence like a gravitational force Teresa refused to acknowledge. "Teresa." His voice was quiet but firm. "We need to talk. Privately." "I don't think that's necessary." But Catherine interrupted, gathering her tablet and phone. "Oh, darling, yes, you should definitely pick her brain about the protocol architecture. She's clearly brilliant." She kissed Martin's cheek again, completely oblivious. "I have a lunch meeting with the board. I'll see you tonight." "Of course." Martin's eyes never left Teresa's face. Once Catherine and the other Hartwell executives had left, it was just Teresa, Martin, and Iris in the massive conference room. The silence stretched like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. "Iris, sweetie." Teresa kept her voice gentle. "Can you go sit in those chairs by the window? I can see you from here, but the grown-ups need to talk about boring business things." "Okay." Iris gathered her coloring supplies obediently, but paused next to Martin. "Are you mad at Aunt Teresa?" "No." Martin's voice was unexpectedly soft. "I'm not mad. Just confused about some things. Aunt Teresa is really smart. She can explain anything if you ask nicely." "I'll remember that. Thank you." Once Iris was settled 20 feet away, carefully out of earshot if they kept their voices low, Martin turned to Teresa with an expression that was equal parts fury and devastation. "Explain. Now. Everything. You don't get to make demands of me. That child thinks I'm her father, Teresa. You stood in front of my wife." He cut himself off, visibly fighting for control. "You brought her here knowing what she would say, what it would look like. You did this deliberately." "I did nothing deliberately except try to secure a contract that will change my company's future." Teresa's voice was sharp as broken glass. "I had no idea you would be in that elevator. I had no idea Catherine Hartwell was your wife, though I should have guessed since you've always been excellent at monetizing relationships. And I certainly didn't plan for Iris to call you Daddy. That was her own conclusion based on things Vanessa told her before she died." Martin flinched at Vanessa's name like he'd been slapped. "I didn't know she was pregnant." "Of course you didn't. You broke things off 3 months before she realized. You were very clear that your merger marriage was proceeding as planned, that Catherine Hartwell came with business connections you couldn't afford to lose, that what you and Vanessa had was beautiful but ultimately impossible." Teresa's voice dripped with acid. "Those are direct quotes, by the way. Vanessa recorded your final conversation. She played it for me approximately 40 times while she was crying so hard she could barely breathe." Jesus. Martin sank into a chair like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "I never meant I cared about her. I did. Your caring killed her." The words were brutal, and Teresa saw them land like physical blows. "She died from pregnancy complications." Teresa continued, her voice shaking now with suppressed fury. Complications that developed because she didn't seek proper medical care until it was too late. Do you know why she didn't seek care? Because she'd lost her job. The job at Raymond Industries where you'd gotten her hired. After you ended things, it became too awkward for her to stay. She was living on her savings, too proud to ask our parents for help because they'd warned her about getting involved with her married boss. Too heartbroken to ask you for help because you'd made it clear she wasn't your responsibility anymore. I would have helped. Martin's voice was hoarse. If I'd known. But you didn't know because you cut her out of your life completely. Changed your personal number. Had your assistant screen her emails. Made sure there was no possibility of contact because Catherine was getting suspicious and you needed to protect your investment. Martin's face had gone gray. How do you know all this? Because Vanessa told me everything. Every detail of your affair, every promise you made, every reason she believed you would choose her. Teresa's voice cracked. And then she died. And I found her journals, her recordings, her carefully preserved evidence of a relationship you tried to erase. She made me promise to tell Iris about you when she was old enough, to make sure your daughter knew her father was a successful man who'd achieved great things. Not that he was a coward who valued profit over people. I want a paternity test. Absolutely not. Teresa, if she's my daughter, she's my daughter. Teresa's voice turned fierce. In every way that matters. I was there when she was born. I was there when Vanessa died 6 hours later from hemorrhaging the doctors couldn't stop. I've been there for every nightmare, every milestone, every moment for 3 years. You contributed genetic material. I contributed a life. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Martin. Vanessa learned that lesson right before she died alone, because the man she loved was at a charity gala with his wife. The silence that followed was crushing. What do you want from me? Martin's voice was barely above a whisper. Teresa laughed bitterly. I don't want anything from you. I'm raising Iris perfectly well on my own. I built a company from nothing while caring for an infant. I don't need your money or your belated guilt or your sudden interest in playing father. Then why tell me at all? You could have corrected her in the elevator, explained I was just someone you knew from business, because she deserves to know where she came from. Teresa's voice softened slightly. Eventually, when she's older and can understand complicated truths, Vanessa made me promise, and despite everything, I loved my sister. I'll keep that promise, but on my timeline, in my way, when I'm certain it won't damage Iris to learn that her biological father chose corporate expansion over her mother's life. Martin stood abruptly and walked to the windows, staring out at the city below. When he spoke again, his voice was raw with emotion. He wasn't bothering to hide anymore. I did love her. Vanessa. It wasn't just an affair or a distraction. I loved her, and I was too much of a coward to choose her. You're right about that, about all of it. I convinced myself the marriage to Catherine was practical, necessary for the business. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of losing my company's stability. Afraid of my family's judgment. Afraid that choosing love over logic would prove I was weak. I don't care about your psychological justifications. I know. Martin turned back to face her. But I need you to understand that walking away from Vanessa was the worst decision I've ever made. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about her, wondered what she was doing, whether she'd found someone who deserved her more than I did. And now you're telling me she's dead, and I have a daughter I've never met, and there's no way to fix any of it. No, Teresa agreed coldly. There isn't. Let me know her. Martin's voice shifted from explanation to plea. Iris, let me be part of her life in whatever way you're comfortable with. I can't repair what I did to Vanessa, but maybe I can be the father her daughter deserves. You mean the way you were going to be the partner Vanessa deserved? The way you were going to leave Catherine once the merger was secure? The way you were going to build a life together eventually? Teresa shook her head. Your promises are worthless, Martin. I watched them destroy my sister. I won't let them touch Iris. Then what? I just walk away. Pretend I never learned I have a daughter. You've been doing exactly that for 5 years. It should be easy. The cruelty was intentional, designed to wound. Teresa watched it hit home, watched Martin's composure crack further. I deserve that. He said it quietly. I deserve much worse. But Teresa, that little girl deserves a father who shows up, who tries, who doesn't let her grow up thinking she wasn't wanted. I can be that if you give me the chance. Why should I believe you? Because I have nothing to gain from lying. You've made it clear you don't need my money. You're building a company that's about to eclipse mine. You hold every card in this situation. The only reason I'm asking, begging for the chance to know Iris is because it's the right thing to do. Because I failed Vanessa, but I don't have to fail her daughter." Teresa looked over at Iris, who'd abandoned her coloring and was now watching them with careful attention. Her dark eyes missed nothing. "Before we continue with this decision that's about to reshape 3 lives forever, I need to pause and speak directly to you. We're at the turning point right here." Teresa could walk away, protect Iris from potential heartbreak, keep her walls up forever, or she could do the hardest thing imaginable, give a broken man the chance to prove people can change. If you're invested in this story, if you're wondering what you would do in Teresa's position, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me should she give Martin a chance or protect Iris at all costs. Subscribe to Mr. Kingsley Luck Stories, because what happens next will test everything you think you know about forgiveness and whether second chances are earned or given. Now let's see what Teresa decides. If I allow you into Iris's life, and this is a massive if, it will be on my terms with my boundaries. Teresa's voice was steel. And the second you prove unreliable, you're gone. No second chances, no explanations, just gone. I understand. You'll see a therapist to deal with whatever cowardice made you abandon Vanessa in the first place. I won't have Iris learning to accept that kind of behavior as normal. Agreed. You won't tell Catherine or anyone else until I decide Iris is ready to handle the complexity of having a father who's married to someone else. Martin hesitated at this. Catherine and our marriage isn't what you think. I don't care what your marriage is. Iris's emotional safety is my only priority. You're right. Of course. Teresa studied him, looking for the lie, the angle, the corporate calculation. But all she saw was a man who looked genuinely devastated, genuinely desperate for a chance he didn't deserve but might, possibly, have earned through sheer force of regret. We'll start slowly, very slowly. You can see Iris once a month for supervised visits. We'll tell her you're an old friend of her mother's who wants to get to know her. Nothing about fatherhood until she's older and can understand. Thank you. Martin's voice was thick with emotion. Teresa, thank you. I promise I won't. Don't promise me anything. Teresa cut him off sharply. Just show up, consistently. That's the only promise I'm interested in. Your actions, not your words. Vanessa got plenty of words. They didn't save her. The barb landed, as intended. Martin nodded, accepting the hit. 3 weeks later, Teresa sat on a bench in Washington Park watching Iris push Cloudhopper on the swings. Yes, the rabbit got to swing too, complete with Iris making whooshing noises and giggling at her own imagination. Martin was late. Teresa checked her phone for the 4th time in 10 minutes. Their agreed meeting time had been 2 o'clock. It was now 2:17, and she was approximately 30 seconds from texting him that the opportunity was revoked, that she'd been right about his promises being worthless. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Martin appeared jogging up the path, slightly out of breath, his business casual clothes at odds with the park's weekend atmosphere. Accident on the highway, complete standstill. I should have left earlier to account for traffic. You should have. Teresa's voice was ice, but she didn't gather Iris and leave. She watched him catch his breath, saw genuine panic in his eyes at the thought he might have missed this chance. It won't happen again. I'll always leave extra time. For the next hour, Teresa watched Martin Raymond, Billionaire CEO, corporate strategist, the man who'd valued a business merger over her sister's heart, push a 5-year-old on. Swings, help her across monkey bars, and listen with apparent genuine interest as Iris explained the elaborate backstory of Cloudhopper, the rabbit's adventures in Cloud Kingdom. He was trying. That much was evident. Over the following months, evidence accumulated slowly. Martin showed up for every visit, often 15 minutes early. He brought small, thoughtful gifts. Books about rabbits after Iris mentioned she liked them. A magnifying glass after she expressed interest in bugs. Nothing excessive, everything meaningful. He asked Teresa's permission before planning activities. He respected her boundaries about what information Iris received. He never pushed for more time than Teresa was comfortable giving. And gradually, Iris began asking for him. When do we see Martin again became a regular question. Her drawing started featuring a tall figure with sad eyes that she carefully colored in with brown marker and labeled Martin. 6 months after that first park visit, Teresa's phone rang at 11 at night. She almost ignored it, but the caller ID showed Martin's name, and he never called this late. What? She answered. Catherine knows. Martin's voice was tight with stress. About Iris. She saw photos on my phone from the park last weekend. She's demanding answers. Teresa's stomach dropped. What did you tell her? Nothing yet. I said I needed time to explain properly. But, Teresa, I can't lie to her about this. She deserves the truth. And Iris? Does she deserve to have her life upended because you couldn't secure your phone properly? 2 days later, Catherine Hartwell appeared at George Tech's offices. Teresa was in a meeting when her assistant interrupted with an apologetic expression and a message that Martin Raymond was in the lobby requesting immediate conversation. The confrontation in the small conference room was cold and controlled. Catherine's composure cracked only slightly around the edges as she confirmed that Iris was Martin's daughter from an affair with Teresa's late sister. When this becomes public, and it will become public when I file for divorce next month, the media will be brutal. Catherine's voice was matter-of-fact. They'll dig into everything. Your sister's affair, your company, Iris's paternity. Are you prepared for that? Teresa hadn't thought that far ahead. I'll protect her, however I have to. Then, we have that in common. Catherine stood gathering her things. For what it's worth, I hope Martin proves himself to be the father Iris deserves. But based on my experience, don't expect miracles. The scandal broke 3 months later when Catherine's divorce filing became public record and enterprising journalists connected the dots. Teresa had prepared as much as possible. She'd spoken with Iris carefully about how people were interested in Martin because he ran a big company. She'd briefed her team at George Tech. She'd even accepted Martin's offer to have security outside their apartment. But no amount of preparation made it easy to watch Iris ask why that lady is taking pictures of us. Until the night Teresa broke down in her kitchen at 2 a.m, crying into tea she'd forgotten to drink, and her phone rang with Martin's name. I can't sleep either. His voice when she answered. I keep thinking about Iris, about whether we're handling this right, whether she's going to be okay. She's resilient. Teresa's voice was rough from crying. Kids are, but she shouldn't have to be. This is my fault. Your choices, and Vanessa's, and mine. Teresa said it wearily. We all played a part. Assigning blame doesn't fix anything. Can I come over? Now. It's 2 a.m. I know. But you sound like you could use someone who understands. 20 minutes later, Martin Raymond sat at her kitchen table in jeans and a sweater that made him look younger, less like the corporate titan who'd chosen empire over love. Teresa poured him tea without asking if he wanted it. They sat in silence for a while, the comfortable kind that comes from shared exhaustion. I'm proud of you, Martin finally said. The way you're handling this, protecting Iris while managing your company. Vanessa would be proud too. Teresa's eyes stung with fresh tears. Don't. What? Don't talk about Vanessa like you knew what she'd want. You broke her heart. You don't get to claim insight into her pride. You're right, Martin said it quietly. I'm sorry. That was presumptuous. More silence. Then Teresa asked the question she'd been avoiding for months. Do you regret it? Not just the affair and how it ended. Do you regret not choosing her when you had the chance? Martin met her eyes and she saw grief there, real and deep. Every single day. Not just because of Iris, though knowing I have a daughter I could have raised with Vanessa makes it worse, but because Vanessa saw me clearly, all my flaws and fears and selfish tendencies, and she loved me anyway. She made me want to be better, and instead of rising to meet that, I chose the easier path. Yes, I regret it. It's the biggest mistake of my life. She really loved you, Teresa whispered. Until the day she died, she believed you'd come back. I wish I had. God, I wish I could go back and make different choices. But I can't. All I can do is try to be the father Iris deserves and hope that somehow makes up for failing Vanessa. It doesn't make up for it, Teresa said. Nothing can. But it matters anyway. Martin reached across the table, his hand palm up, an offering. Teresa looked at it for a long moment before placing her own hand in his. They sat like that until dawn, 2 people bound together by a little girl sleeping down the hall, by grief for a woman they'd both loved in different ways, by the slow, careful work of building something new from the rubble of old mistakes. When morning came and Iris emerged rubbing sleepy eyes, she found Martin making pancakes while Teresa supervised with coffee and gentle corrections to his technique. Martin, Iris's face lit up. Are you staying for breakfast? If that's okay with your Aunt Teresa. He glanced at Teresa. Teresa felt something shift in her chest, a wall crumbling that she'd worked so hard to maintain. It's okay. He can stay. 1 year after that first meeting in the elevator, They stood together at a foundation gala for the Vanessa George Memorial Fund. Teresa had established it to support women in tech who faced impossible choices. Martin was co-founder, his capital combined with her vision. Iris charmed donors with stories about her mother, age-appropriate and beautiful, her purple dress twirling as she danced between tables. Teresa wore an emerald gown. Martin stood beside her in black tie, his arm around her waist, casual and comfortable, and earned through hundreds of small choices to show up, to try, to be better. "We did okay, didn't we?" Martin said quietly, watching Iris laugh with other children. "We did better than okay," Teresa replied. "We turned the worst thing into something beautiful." "I love you." He said it simply. "I love you too." She answered, again, still, earned through every difficult moment. Iris ran to them needing help with her dress. Martin crouched to fix it while Teresa watched. The three of them, imperfect and complicated and real. A family built from grief, transformed through consistent choice. This story teaches us something crucial about life. Second chances aren't given, they're earned through consistent action. Trust broken by cowardice can be rebuilt through courage. The people who hurt us most can learn to love us best if we're brave enough to let them try. Family isn't just biology. It's who shows up every day even when it's hard. Grief can be transformed into something beautiful when we choose building over breaking. Vanessa's death wasn't in vain. Iris grew up knowing her mother's brilliance through the foundation. Martin learned the lesson too late for Vanessa, but in time for Iris. And Teresa discovered that surviving isn't the same as living and chose to live. If this story moved you, if you believe in the messy work of becoming better than we were, I need you to do something right now. Hit that like button, not just for the algorithm, but because you believe people can change, because you believe children deserve parents who show up, because you believe trust can be rebuilt from ashes. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worst mistakes don't have to define their entire story, that it's never too late to choose differently, that families can be built in unexpected ways. Subscribe to Mr. Kingsley Luck's stories and turn on notifications, because this is what we do here. We tell the truth about love, loss, and redemption. We don't give you fairy tales. We give you real stories about real people navigating impossible situations and choosing to be better. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever had to decide whether to give someone a second chance? What helped you make that choice? I read every single comment and your stories matter. And if you're still here after 5,000 words, thank you. Your time is valuable and you chose to spend it with Teresa, Martin, and Iris. That means everything. Remember, the best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt us. It's building something so beautiful from the wreckage that they have to witness what they almost missed. Teresa did that. Martin learned that. Iris received that. And you can too. This is Mr. Kingsley Luck Stories, where broken things become beautiful, where mistakes become lessons, where grief becomes growth. Until next time, choose courage over comfort, action over promises, and never stop believing that people can become who they needed to be all along. See you in the next story.